Hello everybody, Blue Dooley out in the garage without a hat today. Actually, I'm redoing my intro for the first part of my transmission swap video series. All the other videos prior to this was actually doing work on the engine. We're now actually starting on getting the transmission hooked up to the engine, the transfer case adapter on, and all the electrical stuff out in the truck. So in part one, we're going to go over switching the steering columns out, wiring up the computer harness that CA Conversions sent me with the transmission. So we'll kind of cover what all that comes with and what you need to source yourself. We'll also cover switching out the clutch and brake pedal for just the single automatic brake pedal. It's actually pretty straightforward because the steering columns and the pedal mounts for the half-ton, 3/4 ton, 1 ton are all the same. You either get the column that doesn't have the automatic lever on it, or you get the column that has the automatic lever on it. That's the only two steering columns there are. Same with the brakes. The mount's the same, it's just how they're in the mount that's a little bit different. So we'll cover that in this video. And then the second video, we'll actually go over some of the adapters, like the transfer case adapter is a little wonky, but the adapter for getting the transmission bolted directly to the engine was actually pretty straightforward, and I didn't get a lot filmed on that. I'll apologize in advance, and I'll apologize in that video too. But when I got to getting it put together, I was tired and hot and just wanted to get it done. So there isn't a lot to cover in that, but you can probably see the motor and the transmission in the background. It is ready to go in the truck. So by the time this video comes out, hopefully James and I will have gotten all of this crap in the truck and started actually hooking things back up to it. So stick around, show you what you need, and then in part two, hopefully we'll get some more stuff done. So one of the things you do need to do with the automatic conversion, if you don't want to mess with putting a floor shifter in and you want to use a column shift so it looks factory, you will need an automatic transmission steering column. Thankfully, on Dodges, the half-ton through the 1 ton all use the same steering column, and they have one for the one for the automatic and one for the manual, which is what I have. Also, you can tell mine's been in a little bit of shape because it's not as rusted up as this one. Obviously, the big difference here is up here. This is the shifter for the transmission, and it actually runs through the whole thing down to the lever. I don't know if I can do this way or not and actually show you how it works. But it's just a sleeve that runs over the steering shaft out here. It's held in with 3 bolts at the firewall, which is the same. Mine has a little hole in it because I ran some wires through it. And then it's bolted up here at the top, the same. Aside from the shifter, they're identical. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take the all my key switch and ignition off of mine because I've changed it recently. Put it over on this one. The steering wheels are actually the same as well. Both of them have this cruise control on them, so I'll take my steering wheel off, put it on this steering column. When you're removing this one, you got a few more extra brackets here, which again, I'm not sure if you'll see it move or not. But this little arm here runs up to the dash with a very thin copper wire. It moves the park, moves the little gauge that tells you if you're in park, reverse, neutral, or whatever. So if you want to keep that, you'll also need an instrument panel. The Allison conversion actually comes with a little gear monitor like they have in commercial trucks that tells you what you're in and then what the actual gear you're in is. So when you drive, it'll say 6, and then on the next to it, it'll tell you what gear you're currently in, which is what, again, the commercial trucks do. So pretty familiar if you've driven an Allison in a commercial truck. I'll also probably switch over the turn signal, electronics, like I said, the ignition, I'll switch over as well, because the truck I took this out of was missing both the passenger main door and the little quarter door for the back seat. So the interior's been exposed to the elements a lot longer. So I'll kind of clean this one up and like I said, switch some things over. I'll probably not going to film that because it's just unbolting and bolting on some pretty easy stuff. And then we'll get this in the truck. The other things I picked up out of this truck, I found, ran over the bubble wrap. I got the brake pedal out of the automatic, and the nice thing about, again, Dodge using a lot of the same parts, the bracket that holds the pedals is the same for the automatic or the manual. It's just how long this piece is and how the shape of the brake pedal is. That's the only difference between the automatic and the manual. And you will also need the shift linkage. So this runs up here, hooks into here, and then there's a rod runs across the frame, the top of the frame, and then the shift linkage comes off of this arm and runs down to the transmission. So you will need this piece as well. Again, if you're not going to go with a floor shift, which I had considered doing just to save me some headaches, but then I found that these out of a wrecking yard aren't too terribly expensive. I paid 160 bucks for the steering column, which was the whole steering column, this shift linkage, the brake and the brake pedal, which I didn't think was too bad. I've seen these go from about 110 to about 200 bucks on the internet. Just kind of depends, I suppose, on how desirable they are in your area. Have the old column up in the vise, and I'll get you in close. The first thing you will need if you're going to switch all your electronics over like me is you need a tamper-proof set of Torx bits. Hopefully they're standard, because I don't have a set of metric. But the ignition and the turn signals are all held on with tamper-proof bolts, probably to make it harder to steal the vehicle. And hope that the one that's missing isn't the one I need. Yep. Of course, the one I needed is the one I was missing, so a quick trip to Harbor Freight got me this impressive set of tamper-proof bits for 10 bucks. Torx, Allen, flat, some Phillips heads. They're a little offset. I don't know how easy those are to see, but 10 bucks for all the tamper-proof bits I could want. And it fits in a regular screwdriver handle. Yeah, should fit in a regular screwdriver handle. There we go. As I said, I'd already recently changed my keys out in this ignition, so I know it's in good shape. I want to keep it. I don't know how old the other one is, if it had ever been changed. Now that we've got the turn signal and the ignition switch off, I'm going to go ahead and take these off the back of the steering wheel, maybe. They're an 8mm socket. Those little guys there. Of course, this is a lot easier to do with it out of the truck. That. Okay, those get the airbag out of the way. So those are the last two wires going in the steering wheel. And it does not appear if there's, you can actually unplug these or not. So I might have to cut those and solder them into the other steering column. I'm not 100% sure, so probably should get the instruction book out and take a look. But then just one nut holding the steering wheel to the shaft. The black thicker wire is clipped in, so you just got to unclip it, and then the red wire also has a clip on it, but it also, you need a screwdriver so you can kind of push on it because that is a little lock tab on it. So that's where that's at. You want to save that. So the thing you got to remember is there's a clock spring in here. So you don't want to turn it too much when you're pulling the steering wheel off. So that's our next thing to do. And it looks like we will need to disconnect the cruise control, which are held in by regular Torx heads, so I can take those off. So we'll get all that done off camera. Well, we got the old shift knob pulled off the end of the shift arm here. It is splined, so it doesn't twist off. You pretty much got to grab a hold of it with pliers and knock it off. I chewed it up a little bit. But this is out of a 98, and it had the overdrive button out here. So this was already hollow, because they send you the 4th gen shifter, which won't hook in for obvious reasons. It's a little different. But what you need to do is kind of do the same procedure, but there's a little circuit board that pops out of the new shifter, and then you can pull this end off and then feed the wires through the old shifter, put the new knob on, and gently put the circuit board back in here. And that actually will run the tap shift for when you go into manual mode. Better, and probably put a little glue on here. And then gently tap that handle on. Pretty much like that. And then I can feed the wires through. They'll come out right here. And then this will do the tap to shift function when you put the Allison in manual mode. I'm not sure if the tow haul mode still works or not, but there's only 2 wires coming off of this little circuit board. So I would think that whatever these 2 wires signal send down to the transmission, it'll kind of know what to do. That's kind of interesting though, that these shift knobs and stuff are all the same size. So here are the brake pedal and clutch pedal out of my truck, and then the brake pedal out of the automatic truck. And the only difference is that piece right here, of course, and how big it is. But this fits in the same spot as both of those. So all you have to do is pull, there's a big pin with a couple E-clips on it. Pull it out to the driver or the passenger side, and then you can get both of those pedals out. We can get that pedal in the truck, and that will pretty much change all the pedals out. So it's pretty straightforward. If you're a big guy like me, it's gonna be a son of a bitch. I'll tell you that right now. Even with the steering column out of the way, it'd almost give yourself more room if you took the driver's seat out. So the pins actually goes behind this part. You can actually kind of see right there where it is. I can't see it, but you're a little closer. I took the brake switch off just to make getting the clip off of this easier. And then this little wire here, I actually spliced together quite some time ago because this is the wires that tell the computer the clutch is depressed to start it. So I just twisted them together so I could start it no matter what, because that sensor went out. And it's not a serviceable component. You have to change the whole master cylinder out to change this sensor. So that's just kind of a giant pain in the ass. Here's what the pin looks like. So we'll get it kind of started in here. And then we'll hopefully get the brake pedal slid up in there pretty easy. Like I said, this isn't an easy task for a big dude. Woo. It helps if your little bushings stay in place. Of course, you can't see crap. I have no idea if I'm in the right spot or not. Don't have a clue. So I'm gonna have to move you out of the way and get this figured out. Took a little swearing, but we got that pin all the way through. There's a big E-clip I gotta get on there still. And it's hard to see anything underneath the dash here. There's just so much shit in the way. But brake pedal's in place. I need to put the clip on that and then get the brake light sensor on. But let's grab one of these E-clips here. Yeah, pretty good sized Jesus clip or E-clip. I've heard a lot of people call them Jesus clips because that's usually what you yell when it goes flying across the shop and you don't know where it landed is Jesus. So we'll get that on and then we can get the steering column in. All right, I'm not going to be able to, not sure how much you'll be able to see. So those fit over those studs pretty easy. You'll need a 10mm and a 15mm socket, both to take these apart and put them back together, of course. The 10mm for the two little nuts that hold the column up to the dash, and then the 15, I think it's 15, might be 13. Nope. 15mm. So the steering column has some odd kind of nuts that hold it up in place. There's one. Here, I'll grab you. The 10mm are right there. One on each side. There isn't enough. Sometimes you just need a third hand to hold the camera. So there's one, two. I'll get those tightened down. And we will, then we'll get on to those other ones. All of this hardware has washers on it too. the last one. And that one's going to be hard to reach, so I just use a really long extension so I don't have to try to get as much of me underneath the dash as possible. There's that one. Which way it came at this one. How the new column's looking. It might be locked because the key's not in it. But I like where the buttons are at. Can see them pretty good. So I'll go ahead and finish buttoning up this part, and then we'll head in the garage and take a look at the wiring. I suppose actually we should put the ignition on there and make sure everything works, huh? So that would be start. So that's probably locked by the steps in the transmission. But cool, all that stuff works. Nothing's hooked up yet, but I wanted to make sure the mechanical parts of it, everything worked. Yep. So that's good. I'm going to put a little oil here in this bearing, and then we'll get the turn signal, wiper blades and all that stuff plugged. When I installed the steering shaft, I hooked the other end up at the U-joint side first because it can only go one way. And then the steering wheel is keyed, but one of the, or splined, but one of the splines is thicker, so it'll only go in one way. So that made sure everything got lined up. And then this little assembly behind it that actually runs all the wires out here for the cruise and your airbag spins. And when the wheel's centered, there's some little pins here that'll kind of lock it in place. So if you're a little off, you'll have to push those little pins in a little bit, kind of turn it enough to get it lined up, and everything will go together real smooth. It's definitely something you don't want to force. You just kind of want to gently put this together. And then once you got all the splines lined up, you can tighten this up. And I'll have to put the torque specs in a video later. But I got the switches. I sprayed them out with electric clean. I need to clean them up with some Armor All wipes. Those are hooked up. Get the airbag back in, and then this part of the conversion will be... So everything pictured here, CA conversion sends you with the transmission, control modules, a throttle position sensor on a cable. It has the OBD2 port right there. That little screen tells you what gear and mode the transmission's in, much like Allison uses on their commercial applications. The whole harness is really nicely made. All the wires come out pretty much so when you flop it next to the transmission, you know where everything plugs in. That gray end can be forced in upside down, but there's a little arrow on top that you need to make sure that arrow's on the upside of the harness when you plug it in. This actually goes on the transmission itself where the shift linkage goes into the transmission. That actually tells you two of the wires are for the park neutral safety switch, so the truck won't start in gear and then the other two actually are what trigger your reverse lights when you put the truck in reverse. So that shift lever, all of that stuff comes with the transmission. You do have to do a little wiring, and the directions actually say to mount both of those control modules on the firewall, and I'll show you here in a minute. But I don't know about anybody else, but I got a lot of shit on the firewall and there's no place for those anywhere. I am curious as to how you get that OBD2 plug far enough in the cab with as short as that wire is, because I thought all the computers and stuff went inside the cab, but the directions say to mount that stuff on the outside. So that might be a little bit of a reach for big guys like myself. So yeah, everything's included. There's actually the kickdown, it's actually a kickdown cable for a carburetor that mounts to. So that's kind of a universal fit. I haven't looked into how that actually bolts up to the throttle on the engine. But a really nice harness. One of my tags came off the gray wire for the check engine or the check transmission light, but every other wire stayed labeled, and the directions actually tell you what orange wire and purple wires and where everything goes. Also explains how to tap into the fuses so you can get power to power all of this. Hopefully it might be actually too dark. We'll get in here. But they actually wanted the stuff mounted right here, and the clutch reservoir sat right here. But I have relays for my lift pump in the way. I don't remember what this little guy goes to, because this is has been on the truck. But that is the new relay. So I'm gonna have to find somewhere else down here to mount it. I'm thinking since the engine and everything's out of the way, I'll be able to get in here and maybe just mount it down a little lower and a little further back. I'm actually going to run the harness up through the hole where the clutch master cylinder goes, as that seems like a pretty good place to run it. But I also need to make sure all the wires stay out of the way of the shift linkage. So I'm gonna have to undo a bunch of wiring, and I think I'm probably gonna replace my fuel line because it looks like it's cracking a little bit. So I gotta get all that shit out of the way. But so yeah, figuring out where I'm gonna mount stuff, that might be a little bit of a trick. Got the computer module mounted where the reservoir for the clutch was. Actually used one of the clutch's screws, drilled it right in the hole. Used a self-tapper that somebody had used up here for the relay for the fuel pump, which I have zip tied to the ABS bracket. And this module it's just sitting there for the moment. There's not quite enough room to tuck it anywhere out of the way at the moment. So, kind of hanging tight on that one. We also have the fuel pressure sensor for the fuel gauge I got. And then there's also the purple and gray down there are for the transmission temp sensor I have. Come around here to a giant mess. So I used a fuse tap to do the 12-volt ignition circuit, and then I don't have power seats, so for the constant battery power, which is also 10 amp, I just put a fuse in line and then just tapped right into the power seat function, because that should have power all the time. Not sure how good you're going to be able to see in there, but I got the wires pulled through, and this wire, part of the loom, is what goes to this little guy, which is a 3D printed case for the display. And they give you plenty of wire on it, so you can mount it just about anywhere. So I think I'm going to cut it in Maybe have it sit right here, or might try to tuck it in. Might try to tuck it in right there. Kind of depends on how much room is in this plastic bezel that goes around. Well, there we have it. Fireworks going off. The Allison is bolted to the Cummins. And that triple disc torque converter was a son of a bitch to get on the input shaft of that transmission. I actually had to stand it up on end and pretty much drop it straight down. Still got 2 more mounts to do. And we did, I'm going to steal a line from Matt over at Diesel Creek, but we did some socially distanced show truck stuff to it because a little far away, the blue looks really good. If you get right up next to it, you can kind of see it. It didn't turn out as nice as I would have liked. But the block has been painted. The valve cover, these valve cover seals came blue. So that was kind of a happy surprise. Since, well, it's a blue dually. I decided to do the alternator bracket, the oil feed line to the turbo. Hopefully, all of this can get crammed in the truck. So that's going to do it for part 1 of the actual swap. As you've seen earlier in the video, we got some wiring done. Still got a little more wiring to do left, but I kind of need the transmission in there so I know how much wire to run to it. So this is going to be late, but hope everyone had a happy 4th of July, and we will catch you in the next video. Be sure to subscribe so you can see this damn thing eventually in the truck and running.